Welcome to everyone just joining us to Free School for Farm Workers. We are going to get started in just a moment. If you want to just share in the chat where you're calling in from, we'd love to hear it from you.
All right, everyone. Before we get started, we are going to get set up with our interpretation channels. So we are going to be having this session simultaneously interpreted into Spanish and English. And it's important that we choose a language channel to participate in, either in English or Spanish. And we have our screen up here. So if you are joining from a computer, you can look at the bottom of your Zoom screen and you should see a little globe located down there that says interpretation. Click on English if you're participating in English, and you can mute original audio. If you do that, then you will only hear the voice of the interpreter. If you don't select to mute original audio, then you'll hear the speaker's voice quietly in the background. We have Spanish instructions on the right-hand side there. If you are joining via smartphone, there should be 3 dots. You can click on More, and then you can select language interpretation, select English or Spanish, and then click Done. Again, you can mute original audio to only hear the voice of the interpreter, or leave that unmuted to hear the speaker's voice quietly in the background. It's important that everybody select a language channel so you are in either English or Spanish. Let us know if you have any questions in the chat, and we can try to help you troubleshoot those. But now everybody here should hopefully be set up in one of those language channels, and we expect that more folks will continue joining as we get started tonight. So just a heads up that we will be sharing these instructions in the chat. So there will be some long chat messages popping up every now and then, just FYI. All right, Anita, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. Well, welcome everyone to Free School for Farm Workers, staying safe and caring for your crew in extreme heat. We're really excited to be hosting this teach-in on such an important topic, and we're so glad that you're spending your afternoon or evening wherever you're calling in from. So very quickly, my co-organizer and I want to introduce ourselves. We're going to be emceeing today's teach-in and introducing our incredible speakers. So my name is Anita. I work at Not Our Farm. Not Our Farm's a nonprofit farm workers storytelling project, and our work is national, and I'm based in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Hey everyone, I'm Sarah. I use she, her pronouns, and I work with UW Extension and with Fair Share CSA Coalition. I'm based in Madison, Wisconsin, and I do a lot of work in this farm labor and leadership space, and I'm really excited to be here with all of you tonight.
Awesome. So before we begin, I just want to share a little bit about Free School for Farm Workers. So Free School is a series that we began this year, and it's inspired by the power of community education and specifically by anarchist free schools that are located all over the world. Free School is a direct response and reaction to the knowledge hoarding that we so often experience and see as workers on farms. And we know that among us, there's so much knowledge and wisdom and skill, and we really wanted to create a space where we can share information among each other and learn and create connections with each other as farm workers. So all of our Free School teach-in topics come from needs and requests posed by farm workers, such as yourselves in the room today. So if there's a topic or a question that you want to Skillshare on or host a future teach-in about, please let us know, and you'll have an opportunity to share ideas in a survey at the end. So today's teach-in is on caring for yourself and your crew in extreme heat. And we recognize that farm workers are on the front lines of climate chaos and weather extremes. Farm workers have been seeing and experiencing changes in weather patterns well before it's been documented and talked about in media or by policymakers. All the while, health experts for years have been sharing that working in the heat is not only about day-to-day survival, but it's also about long-term effects that heat has on our bodies and our lifespans. We also understand and are incredibly angry about the grave reality that there's so few protections for farm workers, period. But specifically on today's topic of heat and smoke and weather extremes that cause serious harm to workers' health and bodies, there's very few regulations. In fact, only 7 states currently have heat protections, and whether they're enforced is another story. So OSHA has been directed to start drafting federal regulations for workers in extreme heat, but that could take up to 10 years before we see anything. And for farm workers on small farms, we all know that OSHA doesn't necessarily protect us either because of the amount of employees that are on our farms. So not only are there minimal protections and regulations in place or even on the horizon, we also have policymakers and government officials actively passing laws to ban life-saving protections for workers. Under capitalism, productivity and money always trumps worker health and well-being. So it's more clear than ever that we have to keep doing, as farm workers, what we've been doing, which is taking care of ourselves and our crew. Because at this point, we cannot trust the powers to be to watch out for our best interest or protect our lives. So this teach-in is a skill sharing session, and we're going to be hearing from incredible people approaching heat care as EMT and ambulance drivers, occupational therapists and safety trainers, and farm workers navigating these extremes while in the field. We also really want to hear from all of you attending today about your own tips, your practices, your recipes, your rituals for practicing care while working in heat. This is a true skill share where everyone in this room today is an expert and everyone has something to learn from each other and all perspectives are welcome. So with that, I'll pass it to Sarah to introduce our first speaker.
Thanks, Anita. I'm really excited to introduce Jessica Martinez. Jessica is a master's student in the Environmental Health program at Colorado State University with a concentration in occupational ergonomics and safety. Born and raised in Colombia and with a background in physical therapy and public health administration, Jessica currently works as an outreach core with CSU's High Plains Intermountain Center for Agricultural Health and Safety, where she supports the promotion of health and safety in the workplace for agricultural workers. So welcome, Jessica.
Oh, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction, and in the name of the University of Colorado of the Highlands. This is such a very important topic. So we're going to divide so sorry. The first one, we're going to talk about what are the illnesses that are related to heat, the symptoms and the prevention. The second one is water and sport drinks. What can we do? And then 3, what are the risk factors, environmental risk factors and personal risk factors for heat? Okay, next slide. I want to know the first thing from the beginning. I'm going to be um, sharing my screen this. So this is part of the training material that we have. I'm going to provide this guide so that all of the people can always use this training guide so that all of the people that are involved are receiving exactly the same training and they can share that. So for example, first we're going to talk about the illnesses that are caused or problems, fatigue, heat illness, how to treat heat illness and symptoms of prevention. So remember these 3 important words: water, shade, and rest. The next one, please. Okay, we're going to start with our interactive park. I would really like if you could um, turn your microphones on and participate. What would you do if you were driving on the highway and you realized that your car was overheating? What would you do? Would anyone like to participate?
I would pull over.
Okay. Yes, exactly. You would stop, you would let your car cool down before continuing to drive, because if the car doesn't cool down, that wouldn't, and otherwise it would, ruin the car, and that would cost you a lot of money. Most people would take care of their car if it overheated, but a lot of people don't protect their bodies when their bodies are causing, negatively impacting them and they're shutting down. So it would be that if you stop, you're weak, your work could be in danger as well. So if you don't feel well, it's important to look for help and avoid this overheating. This is what we would like you to do. Next slide, please. So two types of that. One is heat exhaustion and heat stroke, and then that can lead to death. So this is very important to start to avoid an emergency. Further along, we'll talk about the other factors that can affect this, but one of the most common is dehydration, one of the most, or not hydrate yourself enough. The next one.
The symptoms for being tired from heat exhaustion is dizziness, headache, being very sweaty, weak, cramps, vomit, and rapid heartbeats. Next, please. So if you're feeling exhausted because of the heat, it's necessary first, stop working. Second, let your supervisor know that you're feeling ill. Third, go to a shaded area and drink water. In Colorado, all agricultural workers have a space to rest in the shade and drink water. This is known as a cooling break. So my advice to cool off, get rid of extra layers, slowly drink water, fan yourself, and don't go back to work until your body temperature has lowered. Heat stroke that we saw before can quickly turn into heat stroke. It can be red skin, the symptoms, high temperature, and being or feeling disoriented or confused. People who are suffering from heat stroke can also experience rapid heartbeats. Having heat stroke is a very serious illness. So if you feel like heat is affecting you, look to the nearest person, let them know you're feeling ill, and go to a cooling area. If you feel like you might faint or like you're not doing okay, ask for the nearest person to help you out and watch over you. In this case, if you notice that a coworker is feeling ill, let your supervisor know so they can contact medical services. Take this person to the shaded area, let them or help them remove their extra layers. Pour water over them and fan them. If the person is not well enough to sit up, have them take small sips of water. But if the person is not conscious, don't let them drink anything. Remember, this can progress very quickly, so don't leave your coworkers alone if they're experiencing any heat stroke symptoms, because it can rapidly worsen. Remember the words we said before: water, shade, and rest. These are the ways to keep safe while you're working in heat conditions. Take notice of your body when this hot weather begins. It takes up to 2 weeks for your body to get used to working in these conditions. And one of the biggest risks, if you're not used to it, is if your body never gets acclimated. Don't wait till you're thirsty to drink water. Thirst is one of the first signs that you might be having or getting heat stroke. Like in the example we saw before with the car, drinking water is one of the easiest ways to keep yourself hydrated and cool. Next, prevent overheating. If you start feeling symptoms for heat stroke, go to the shade, rest, and cool. And only when you feel better, return to work. There's something very important that you need to take into consideration. It's that only stopping work or stop working, in this case, will be the only way to prevent heat stroke. You need to rest and cool all through the night. After working during the heat, your body needs time to rest and get ready for work the next day. So keep cool during the night, and that way you'll feel like you have more energy the next day. Take a shower so you cool off. Limit your alcohol consumption and sleep in a cool room. Next, please. So before we keep going with water and talking about how to hydrate us, let's talk about sports drinks, energy drinks, alcohol, and coffee. So there were 3 important words we wanted to take into consideration. Who can remember them?
Water, rest, and shade.
Correct. Perfect. And who can remember what's the first sign that our body needs more water?
Thirstiness.
Being dehydrated? Correct, being dehydrated. But the correct answer is thirst. There's other signs of dehydration. Thirst is usually the first one. So usually for your body to work, you need to have a certain amount of water in it. So your organs will work right. And if your body doesn't have enough water, it's like having your car running without enough cooling liquids.
32 ounces is about approximately 1 liter of water. So the way that we can measure these 8 ounces of water is a fist. A fist is approximately equal to 8 ounces of water. So if you know those, as you can see on the screen, if you have you should drink 4 large cones or 2. A normal water bottle, it contains approximately 16 ounces of water. 2 water bottles, you should have that when it's hot, about approximately 2 per hour. So some people say that you should drink 4 glasses per hour, think that, oh, that it's going to make them urinate so much. But in any case, on a hot day, your body that will help your body to keep a healthy temperature and to recuperate. When you drink more water, your body temperature goes down a little bit. Your body is getting accustomed to um, sweating more and getting accustomed to the heat. So to understand a little bit more, so on the left, if you can imagine that paper towel is your body. So what happens if I dump all of that water on the towel? What will happen to that paper towel? Anyone? What do you think that would happen to the majority of the water?
It would go right through.
Correct. The paper towel would absorb whatever it could, but the majority of the water would end up on the ground. But if, for example, if you had take um, the whole glass of water in a spray bottle, and then we sprayed a little bit, and then I put it in the sun, and then I sprayed a little bit, and I left it for 15 minutes, and then I left it, and then all the time. So then we would have all of that. So then the paper towel would always be a little bit damp, but it would never be so wet that the water would just drip to the ground. So um, that you should be consuming water. Your water works very similar. Your body works very, very similar. If I drink 4 waters or 2 bottles of water right away, I slam both of them, or every hour, your body will absorb whatever it can. But because it couldn't use all of the water at once, it would have to go to the bathroom to eliminate the excess of water. But if I drank a little bit of water frequently throughout the time, then if you did it even before you were thirsty, you would have to, then your body would be able to sweat that, and you would be able to be refreshed. So so an easy way to see if you're drinking enough water, another way to say if you can see if you're hydrated um without counting how many glasses of water you've had to drink. Monitor the color of your urine. If it has a dark color, and it has a strong smell, you're probably not drinking enough water. If it's clear, it's a very light color, um, and it doesn't have a strong smell, then you're probably well hydrated. So this is a long time that there are in different workplaces. You can this information is, but a lot of time you can do this at home as well, either before work or after work. Next slide, please. Okay, so not all liquids keep us hydrated the same as water. Sports drinks, can help once in a while, um, but it should always be a small quantity compared to all of the liquid that you drink in a day. When you sweat over a long period of time, your body doesn't it doesn't just lose water, it loses important minerals that are called electrolytes. And those are the minerals that are helpful to help your body function. Those sports drinks are important for athletes and those that are practicing sports that are losing those throughout the day. What happens here is the water, and in addition to water and minerals, sports drinks contain a lot of sugar. And so sports drinks, if you drink them very often and a lot, they can contribute to health problems. Um, so even though if you're sweating a lot, if you can substitute, um, you know, if you substitute a sports drink instead of water for one of the water, but you should only do that a maximum of 2 times a day. Remember that a glass should have about 4 ounces of water, but it's important not to drink more than half of a sports drink at one sitting. So for energy drinks, you shouldn't use energy drinks to hydrate your body. They contain chemicals, stimulants, and chemicals, stimulants, and sugar, and they can cause things like accelerated heartbeat, difficulty sleeping, faster heartbeat. They can give you a temporary effect, but they can also cause very serious effects on your health. So for that reason, it's important that the energy that you need to work, we should have it through good, um, through good nutrition instead of just drinking energy drinks. So now let's talk about other kinds of drinks. It's very common that, for people to have, coffee in the morning and alcohol at lunch or a beer with lunch or after work. It's okay to have some, but it's important to be well hydrated. It's a very good idea in the summer to drink less coffee and replace it with water. Does anyone want to share what happens when someone has had too much to drink, too much alcohol to drink? Somebody could have a headache. You could be tired and you could be thirsty, right? This is due to the fact that alcohol has the opposite effect of what water does in your body. Alcohol is a diuretic. It causes you to urinate more and then dehydrate you.
Okay, we're going to start talking about the risk factors of heat-related illnesses. To remember, what's the best way to keep hydrated while you're working under the sun? The best way to be hydrated is to drink water. How much water should you be drinking? We should be drinking 4 glasses of 8 ounces every hour. What can we use to measure these glasses? Your fist. And finally, how can we monitor for drinking enough water? We need to look at our pee. We need to look at the color of our pee. Since we have this information clear again, let's look at the 2 risk factors, environmental and personal, that could lead somebody to have heat stroke. It's our environment, temperature, humidity, how much sun we're receiving, our clothing, how much effort we're doing, and the equipment we're using. Since you've probably guessed, outside temperature is the biggest risk, but air humidity also really affects the sensation of the temperature. And that's why it's very important when we're in hot weather to be constantly checking weather conditions. Another factor is wind. If the temperature is really hot, but maybe the air is fresh, a breeze can easily cool us down. But if the temperature is hot and the air is hot as well, it will be like being inside an oven. So it's very important to look at the clothes that we're wearing. The idea or the ideal, it would be to use adequate clothing like long sleeve, closed, using hats. And it's also preferable to be wearing light clothes. Sometimes it's better to wear several layers. So if you're somebody that sweats a lot, it's also important for you to know that you should be drinking more water. Now, what happens when you need to wear safety equipment like aprons? Sometimes these equipments cover your body, which means that the body is going to be working harder to cool off. So be very careful, drink a lot of water, and rest so you don't overheat. Next slide, please. Perfect. And to conclude, before talking about other risk factors, personal risk factors, about heat-related illnesses, let's talk about something very important that everybody considers, which is getting used to the heat. To function properly, your body needs to remain within 96 and 99 Fahrenheit, which corresponds to 36 and 37 Fahrenheit. Celsius, sorry. So your body needs to find a balance within this process of getting used to the heat and this process of getting used to the heat. and this is called acclimatization, which is getting used to the heat. It can take you up to 2 weeks to get used to the heat. So while you're getting used to the heat, it's recommended that you take often breaks. You can take 10 minutes every 2 hours during the first 4 days of work. It's also important to take additional precautions like working slower and drinking more water. Other risk factors, other than getting used to the heat, is just taking care of your health in general, drinking water, not drinking alcohol. And you also have to realize that if you're taking medications, that could be something affecting you, like also ongoing illnesses like diabetes or hypertension can get worse with the heat. Remember that alcohol, caffeine, and energy drinks are not good substitutes for water. Some medications can also increase the risk of you having heat stroke, which can make your heart beat faster, or they can also act as diuretics. So make sure that if you're taking medicine or you have prescriptions, you mention this to your doctor to see if it's contraindicated with being on the heat for long periods of time. So thank you so much, everyone, for participating and for being here. I hope you guys stay safe this summer during these harsh weathers.
Thank you, Jessica, for sharing all of that very incredibly rich information. We will share this after the fact as well, so that folks will have a chance to really dig in and return to this information as well. So we are now going to turn it over to Maxfield Estella. Max is a Tucson, Arizona-based EMT, or Emergency Medical Technician. His background includes working on 911 ambulances along the US-Mexico border, as a Sawyer and EMT on wildland fire crews, and as a volunteer providing humanitarian aid in the borderlands with No Más Muertes, or No More Deaths. Welcome, Max.
Hey, thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you, Jessica, for that wonderful talk about like the best way to prevent heat exhaustion on the field. So with my background, working along in the Sonoran Desert, I've seen a lot of heat exhaustion and heat stroke. And I've seen this happen for people that are working outside, but also just people being inside without air conditioning in their homes too. The area that I worked on is on the Tohono O'odham Reservation, and a lot of people there don't have air conditioning. So in the summer, it can be very dangerous just for folks living in their house. So hopefully, whether you're at work or not, this information can be useful to you. I think, as Jessica was saying, one of the most important things is to check in with your body. I've only done a little bit of farming in my past, but on wildfires, I've seen a lot of the crew members I've worked with that have pushed themselves too hard on the job and try not to take breaks. And, it can be difficult because we have deadlines and there's an amount of work we need to get done for the day. But at the end of it, it's just not worth having any health complications. And, besides that, if you do go down with heat exhaustion, or worse, you'll end up missing even more work because the recovery time, especially after heat stroke, can be weeks. So, that's a lot of work on a farm that I'm sure you care about, and also a lot of financial loss if you end up missing out work. So as Jessica went over, knowing the signs that you're becoming dehydrated is the most important, because prevention of heat exhaustion and heat stroke is more valuable than curing it once it actually happens. So let's talk about what happens if you do undergo a heat emergency. First, let's look at heat exhaustion. So, as we just discussed, your first priority should be making sure other people know that you need to step out and away from your work, and then finding shade. If it's possible to get to an air-conditioned space, that's even better. If someone has like a vehicle on the farm that you could go into and like just turn on the AC and sit there, that'll be the fastest way to cool you down. And when you're doing that, it's important to take off any bulky clothes that you're wearing, because this will allow the airflow to move past you and cool off the sweat on your skin. And that'll let the heat dissipate faster. I'm seeing a message in the chat that says, not being silly, really asking, should we or should we not go in the fridge? I think that's a great idea. I think if you have a fridge, that's a wonderful use. Fully support it. What can be helpful is lying down as well. You know, one of the symptoms of heat exhaustion is dizziness. And you know, you don't want to fall down and hit your head or have a different injury from it. So lying down can be really useful, or just like sitting up propped up against something is good. As you can see in the diagram on the slide, this person is doing a lot of the strategies that are helpful for cooling down. So wetting your clothes, that'll make contact with your skin and let you cool down faster. Putting a wet towel around your neck can be something that's very helpful too. If there's a breeze, you know, try and position yourself so the wind is blowing on you. But if there's not, having like fanning yourself or having a friend fan you to try and get more airflow is really going to help evaporate that sweat off you, and that'll cool you down the fastest. So if you can, it's really important to have somebody with you if you're taking some time out, or at least be like in sight of other people that are working, because heat exhaustion can progress to heat stroke. So you really want to make sure that you can stop it early on. And if it does progress, you're going to need to have somebody that can step in and help you if you are going through heat stroke. So if you're going through heat stroke, you're going to need help from someone else. So let's talk a little bit about what to do if someone else is going through heat stroke. Yep, next slide, great. So heat stroke is a body temperature above 104 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 40 degrees Celsius. And the main difference is you start to have neurological symptoms. So this is a progression of heat exhaustion. And since you're having neurological symptoms, it's harder to make decisions and realize the steps you need in order to feel better. So for checking in on other people, be on the lookout for if your coworkers are looking disoriented or confused, and be on the lookout for hot and dry skin. So with heat exhaustion, your body is compensating for heat by sweating a whole lot to try and cool you down. So you need to help out this process by finding shade and trying to cool your body down. But your body's doing its best to get rid of this extra heat. Now, I'd like to go into the biology a little bit, because I think it can be helpful to have an understanding of how your body works to keep you healthy. The main function of your heart and your body is to make sure that your brain and your organs are getting enough blood flow. So this is related to the pressure of your blood that's flowing through. So when you get dehydrated, you're actually losing the pressure in your blood, because the water that's in your blood is leaving out and becoming sweat. So you're getting less blood flow to your organs. So when your body goes into heat stroke to compensate for the lack of fluids in your body, the person will stop sweating, because your brain is telling your body to keep all the water it can. So this is why your skin becomes hot and dry, because your brain is saying, hey, we need the sweat to stay inside, to make sure we're getting enough blood flow. So the other way your body is going to compensate is by making your blood vessels smaller. In heat exhaustion, your blood vessels become big and your skin will look red, because your body is trying to dissipate the heat that's inside your blood to go out to your skin. But in heat stroke, since we're trying to hold on to that blood, your vessels have become smaller. And the side effect of this is that now we're trapping in all this heat closer into our bodies. So your body is going into heat stroke as a way to try and protect itself. But unfortunately, it's actually making matters worse by guarding in all the extra heat. We could go to the next slide, please. So yeah, as we talked about, heat exhaustion can be treated with good shade and care, but heat stroke is a medical emergency. And it's important to try and cool this person down as quickly as possible and get them medical attention. So the person is going to need to be actively cooled down. And if you take a look at this diagram, you can see where these like ice packs are being placed. They're being placed at the armpits, the groin, as well as like the neck. And it's doing this because these areas have a lot of blood vessels. So the goal here is to cool the blood down, which will circulate throughout the body. So if you have an ice cooler to go into, that's perfect for someone in heat stroke as well. And if you have cold water bottles, this is an area that you want to try and get cooled as quickly as possible. The goal would be to get the core body temperature down to 102 degrees as quickly as you can. That's coming down from 104 degrees to 102 degrees. One of the other complications of heat stroke can be seizures. So if a person is suffering from heat stroke, has a seizure, it's really important that you don't try and hold them down or place a bite stick in their mouth. It used to be taught that you should put a stick in the mouth so the person wouldn't bite their tongue. But it turns out that this just caused more injuries from people choking than it helped from stopping the biting of the tongue. So the best thing you can do is just remove objects around them, especially if there's anything like tools or anything sharp on the ground or chairs or anything. Just move it out of the way so when the person is seizing, that they don't hit themselves on any of those. And then from there, you can go in and check to see if they have bit their tongue to assess if there's any bleeding going on. If you could go to the next slide, please. So if a person loses consciousness, you can place them in the recovery position. I'm gonna pause real fast just for a question in the chat, which is, what do you do if you have someone seizing in the field? I think you wanna move what you can away from that person when they're seizing, move the objects away, and then do your best to transport that person, have 4 or 5 people lift them up and transport them into an area where you can cool them down as quickly as possible. Once you have them moved, into a cooler location, then it's a good idea to put them in this position. The recovery position is important because when we lose consciousness, sometimes we can lose our gag reflex. So we can choke on like fluids in our mouth, especially if there's blood. That can cause a choking hazard. And also a person's tongue can actually go back and block their airway and stop them from getting breath. So by putting them on their side like this, this will stop them from like choking if they're unconscious. So this is a very useful tool, not just in heat stroke, but even if you see someone that's passed out for any reason, maybe they like fainted and they still have a pulse, you want to put them in this position. Or if someone drank too much and they've passed out from drinking, this is a good thing to make sure that they don't choke on their vomit. I think this is something that if everyone knew, it could actually save a lot of lives. If someone does go unconscious, you should check to see if they have a if they have a pulse and if they're breathing. From what I've seen, heat stroke, you have like a small window to get definitive care. Seeing in the chat, someone asked if it matters which side the person is on, and no, it doesn't. Yeah, you can put them on either side. But I think, yeah, if you know how to do CPR, then that would be a time that it would be, yeah, it would be helpful to do that and have an ambulance on the way. So with calling an ambulance, you know, that's where we're going to get definitive care for the person. And, you know, we do very similar things like on the ambulance. You know, once we transported someone who had been walking through the desert in summer, and out where I live, it gets to be about 117, 120 degrees Fahrenheit in the summer. And what we did is we just lifted a sheet around their body in the back of the ambulance and just poured ice into it just to get that body temperature down as quick as possible. So if you have enough ice for it, apart from putting the ice in those places around the armpit, the groin, and the neck, which should be the first priority, just getting like an ice bath, like as much cool, would be very helpful. On the ambulance, the person with heat stroke will get a IV of fluids that'll have different electrolytes, and those are a lot of the times we would have those in an ice cooler, so that'll go in and try and cool the body down as quick as possible. So if you see someone and you know, see them starting to be disoriented and confused, then calling an ambulance right away is a great call, because that's how they're going to get good definitive care. You know, we just have things on an ambulance that are much more effective at helping people, you know, than you're able to do without that equipment. Over here on the slide, we can see some helpful things to tell the ambulance workers. So the name, date of birth, any medical conditions, and the names of any medications, if you know that about the person who got sick. That just helps make sure that they get the good care as fast as possible. We could go to the next slide, please. So one thing that I'd like to bring up too is hyponatremia. And I've seen this come up maybe, you know, maybe 2 times for every 10 cases of heat exhaustion or heat stroke. But because of the symptoms, I think it's useful to talk about. So in order to stop dehydration, you know, we need to keep up on staying hydrated. And the information that Jessica shared was a great guide, especially, you know, the urine color, to keep track of, you know, how hydrated we are. But if we overhydrate, we can have what's called hyponatremia. So this is because when we sweat out electrolytes, like, you know, salts and calcium and magnesium and things that are needed for our muscles to work. And that's why electrolyte beverages can be helpful in rehydration, and so can eating salty snacks. But hyponatremia, it breaks down to hypo, which means low, and natremia, which means salt. So what's happening is you're drinking too much water, and the amount of electrolytes is diluted in your blood. And this can cause those symptoms that are listed, such as cramping, nausea, vomiting, headache, fatigue, dizziness, and confusion. And you'll notice a lot of these symptoms are the same as heat exhaustion. But the key difference here is the person has had a lot of water beforehand. The person will tend to be vomiting to get rid of all the excess water, and they'll need to urinate a lot, you know, because they're trying to get it out of them. So the most important thing for someone going through hyponatremia is to stop drinking water. Eating salty snacks can be helpful in restoring your balance, but you should avoid electrolyte drinks because even though those have electrolytes in them, the amount of water makes them not useful for treating this. Hyponatremia will clear up on its own pretty quickly. The times I've seen it in a work context, it's taken someone about, an hour off of staying away from water to kind of have themselves feel better and be able to go out to work. But I think it's just an important thing for people to look at because the symptoms do look very similar to heat exhaustion. So just making sure that you're thinking critically about the amount of water you're taking can be very useful here. One question that I saw was submitted was people asking about the long-term effects of heat stroke. So I just want to take a minute to talk about that. Heat stroke can have lasting effects. One of the main effects is that you're at a higher likelihood to have heat exhaustion and heat stroke in the future if you've suffered from it once. This is why prevention is so important. Your cells have a sort of memory towards them, and having it, your body will tend to respond in a quicker fashion to heat exhaustion. Like we discussed earlier, that heat stroke is your body's response to heat exhaustion. So your body is like learned to kind of jump ahead and go into heat stroke quicker. I'm seeing in the chat someone asking if we have an essential or natural kit that farmers should carry with them to prevent and address heat fatigue. Donna always carries water, salt, sugar, and lemon juice. That's pretty similar to actually what I do. I use maple syrup instead of sugar, but that's the same recipe that I tend to have if I'm out working in the desert a lot. But I think that Jessica's guide is really important of just those 8-ounce water cups, just like throughout an hour, 4 in an hour is a great way to stay hydrated. And adding electrolytes to that can be very helpful as well. The type of injuries that we would expect to see coming from a long-term heat stroke would be heart problems, kidney problems, and liver issues as well. What happens when our body gets to 104 degrees Fahrenheit is the enzymes in our body start to break down because they get too hot to function. And especially in an area like the kidneys, which the kidneys filter all the water for us. And they're made up of like very tiny blood vessels and tubes where water is transported back and forth. So any interruption to the balance going in that part of our body can have like long-lasting effects just because that area is so fragile. I've also heard of neurological symptoms from long-term effects of heat stroke with like brain fog and confusion among people. And I think that current research is still being done on the best way to deal with this. So again, I think the most important advice I could give would be to make sure that you stay hydrated and prevent this beforehand. And well, that's all I got, but I think we'll be opening it up to questions soon in case anyone else has something they'd like to know a bit more in depth about.
Thank you so much, Max, for sharing all of that with us. It was really, really critical information. So we're going to take a 5-minute break, so we can just sit with what we've learned. I know this is a very intense subject. This is life or death we're talking about. So let's just take a minute to step away, and then we're going to hear from 2 farm workers who will talk to us about how they're navigating heat on the farm as well. So we'll return at 10 after in whatever time zone y'all are in. Okay, welcome back, everyone. If you want to make your way back to the teach-in, we have a lot more to share today. So we're going to hear from 2 of our farm workers who are joining us, and then we're going to open it up for question answer with all of the speakers, and then time for you all to skill share and share, your experiences with working with heat on the farm. So I'm going to introduce our first farm worker speaker, Alex Hadji Petros. So Alex, after a decade working in the food service industry, they pivoted in their late 20s to growing food for their community rather than preparing it in its final form. A deep love of delicious food for all and a passion for teaching has led them to a leadership position working for a nonprofit farm in Washington. So welcome, Alex.
Thank you. I'm really grateful to be here and grateful that this exists. I've been a farm worker in Washington State for 8 years now and 10 years in the Pacific Northwest. And even though the Pacific Northwest isn't known for its extreme heat, as climate change continues to affect all of us, even in Western Washington, we see temperatures over 110 degrees almost every year now. And my organization has done a lot of thinking about worker safety. So I'm going to walk through an example of when one of my crew got heat exhaustion a couple years ago and how we dealt with that, and then just go through a couple of my and our organization's heat processes and like ways to help keep yourself and your workers safe. So someone on my crew a couple years ago, it was one of the weeks where we had temperatures over 110 degrees. And I'm a livestock farmer, so even though we start early in the day, when animals are experiencing heat stress in the heat of the day, there's really no way to avoid having to go out and help them. One of the tactics we've used is to try and work in shifts. So if we have to be out in the field in the heat, send one person out and then tag team so that someone can always be working in the shade. So if that's options that might be available to you on your farms, whether that's working in the pack shed or if there's like a shadier area, if you have shade cloth on a tunnel and it's cooler in there, maybe try trading off if that's possible. But despite doing this on a really hot day, one of my workers came in from watering animals at about 3 p.m. and she was dizzy, she was sweating, she was nauseous, she was really nauseous. So took one look at her and realized she was not in a good way. And we're fortunate enough to have a cinder block building with a concrete floor that stays pretty cool in the summertime. So we brought her in there, sat her down with her back against a concrete wall. And one of the things that we do on our farm when we know it's going to be really hot is get one of the big igloo water coolers, fill it with ice, fill it with water, and put cotton towels or rags in that cooler so that we always have cold towels that we can wrap around ourselves or around someone experiencing heat stress. So we sat her down. We got cold towels. This will be echoes of Max's talk just a minute ago. So we had cold towels around her neck, in her armpits, and on her thighs. And we just made sure we sat there with her. We had a popsicle and her water bottle, and we were encouraging her to take small sips of water. It was a really good sign for us to have the popsicle because we'd give her that and she would try and lick it. and then she would feel nauseous again. So we backed off of that. And we pretty much just sat there with her for 20 minutes, swapping out towels for colder ones, and stayed there with her until she started to feel, until she could keep water down, because she was trying to drink little sips of water too, and she'd throw that right up. So it was one of the scarier moments that I've had on like when I'm leading a crew, because watching someone that you're in charge of their safety have a scary moment like that was really rattling to me. And I think it made all of us on the farm really realize how seriously we needed to take that. And it was actually interesting being out in the sun, of course, is, exhausting, and it's really hard on your body. But it was actually getting into our work truck that had been sitting in the sun that really pushed her over the edge. So it's one thing to be mindful of if you're like out in the field and you have a vehicle that doesn't have air conditioning, when you've already stressed yourself, putting yourself in a position where you then have to get into a truck that's probably, I don't know, 130 degrees, can be really just push you over the edge. So if there's like towels that you can lay over the windshield, or any way to try and keep that cab or the vehicle a little bit cooler, it's a great tactic to try and just like mitigate some of those risks. She ended up being fine. She recovered. She lived on the farm, so I took her home and I said, "You're done for the day. You've done your job. Thank you very much." And she was back the next day, and we all just tried to make sure she took it easy and worked mostly in the shade, but full recovery there. So that was great. And then in terms of other things that we do on the farm specifically to try and manage heat stress, so I mentioned keeping a cooler or a igloo cooler drinks. Oh, I'll slow down. Thanks. We keep a cooler, drink or igloo cooler with towels and ice in it to use during breaks, and also so for anyone who needs a cold towel during breaks. And then also if someone is experiencing heat stress, we will use those in an emergency situation. Hydration, of course, is something that we've talked about a lot today, but there's never enough to say about hydration. One of the things that I like to tell my crew is that pre-hydration is important. Making sure you're drinking enough water the night before you get to work and the morning of is just as important as drinking water while you are at work. So what we've talked about electrolytes. I also have a homemade electrolyte mix. I use honey instead of maple syrup, but I'll make a little jar of honey. I like lime and orange and a little bit of salt. And then I'll take that to work and I use it during my lunch break. So I drink water while I'm at work, electrolytes at lunch, and water while I'm at work to have a good balance. One thing you can do if you're a farm leader of a crew is water reminders for your crew that's out in the field. If you use walkie-talkies or a group text, I like to send out a call on the walkie-talkie. Just to everybody remember, drink water while you're out in the field. And sometimes people do. I find that people drink a lot more water and take better care of themselves if they're having that reinforcement from their boss and if their leader is demonstrating that as well. One other thing about hydration that I've noticed, and it seems obvious, but is having a good water bottle. And I think for me, I like a Nalgene because it's lightweight and holds a quart of water, and they come in bright colors. so they don't get lost in the grass. That's water. The last couple things are buddy systems. If you have someone working alone, make sure you have a schedule to check in with them if it's going to be really hot. It's really easy for someone to pass out in the field if they get overworked, and if you don't catch it in time, then that can lead to much worse things. And then shade. I know shade can be a real challenge when you're working in the field. Canopies are a pretty easy answer, and a lot of us have them for farmers markets. But if a canopy isn't available to you, 4 T-posts and a tarp, that'll work. If your employer can't offer you a canopy, most farms have 4 T-posts and a tarp or a piece of shade cloth lying around somewhere. And then I have some notes on clothing, but I think maybe I'll save that for the Skillshare chat later, and we can all talk about clothes together. So thanks for listening. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alex. And yeah, the clothing one is one that we have a lot of questions about. So looking forward to talking about that. So next up, we have Scott Colachico. So Scott is a California-based farm worker. After a long time working between retail sales and high tech, Scott decided to leave the office cubicle and to get outside and into the sunlight. After practicing the necessary skills with permaculture landscape design in 2017, it was COVID that inspired Scott to take the big leap into farming. So after completing the farm manager apprenticeship through the Center for Land-Based Learning in 2024, Scott is looking to start a farm of his own in 2025. Welcome, Scott.
Wonderful. Thank you. Appreciate everything that's been said so far. I feel that Yennefer really covered it clearly. And I got a bunch of new information from the talk. I didn't realize that hyponatremia was a thing, so that was good to know. And I also really love my Nalgene water bottle because it's tractor proof. You can run over it with a tractor and it's probably going to survive. So let's change hats now. While heat stroke is a serious thing, there are ways to make it a little more fun and maybe a little more easy to bring with you, easy to carry along. I really like a big straw hat that I get wet constantly. I'm really lucky on the farms that I've worked on. We do have heat that regularly gets over 110. We'll have many, like 4, 5, 6, sometimes 7 weeks in our summertime of over 100, and of those, maybe 4 or 5 of those might be over 110. We've had up to 120 here in Auburn. Over the last 3 years, we've had that several times. So we've only had one worker have pretty mild to serious, heat stroke. They were fine. They were able to just go home, but it was pretty scary. And so at the time I was always keeping myself wet, but I didn't have a hat. And I went and decided that this was like the next step if I want to prevent myself from getting heat stroke and maybe also model to other folks that it's okay. So the 3 things you want to prevent yourself from heat stroke are water, rest, and shade. And immediately I get water and shade from the wet hat. Shade is part of it. If I get it wet, now I'm using the evaporative cooling. Now you can combine that with a cool handkerchief if you want, to wrap around the neck and keep that wet, whatever you need to do. But the action of going and getting your hat wet, and when it's really hot, you might have to do this 15, 20 minutes, but going and getting your hat wet is an opportunity to rest for a few minutes while you're, walking or like being at near the water, wherever your water is. We have water everywhere because we're mixed organic vegetables. There's lots of water available. And it's an opportunity to drink your water and, take some time to drink your water and do it. It's an opportunity to be mindful, check in with your body. And so while this may be silly to wear a big hat all around, it gives an opportunity to just to check in and to be present. I've worn a lot of different hats. I got this one, I think, for $12 at the Valero here in Newcastle, and they had, a bunch of different logos on them. I have a couple other hats that I don't see right now, but they don't last very long. I think I go through maybe one or two in a full season. It'll get crushed by something, a crate of vegetables, something will happen. But they're inexpensive, and it doesn't matter. And they're just so fashionable. That's pretty much it. This is my case for a big wet straw hat. I think it has a number of different features that allows people to, like I said, check in with your body, take the rest, drink the water, and then you've got shade that you're able to walk around with the entire time. Yeah, that's my thoughts on it. And I'm curious to hear other people's opinions on headgear that they've used, and maybe some fun, and we can dress up sometime.
That's great. Thanks so much, Scott.
Thanks, you guys. It's great.